graduated from high school, but she is an established poet here in Stanislaus County. She's won multiple poetry awards through the Eileen Jaffa Young Poets Contest. She received first prize in 2010, 2011, and 2013, second place in 2012, and is a two-time commemorative award winner in 2011 and 2013. She's published twice through the Modesto Poets Corner contest, and Gillian is attending Whitman College to pursue her love of all things well-written. So please help me welcome Gillian Gray.
Thank you. And I may fuss with the sound a little bit. Okay.
Thank you. All right. First, I would like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I'd like to thank Gillian for inviting me here. It's such an honor to speak here, read my poetry, and hear the poetry of meter maids. I've met some of you and incredible people. So I guess I would start a little bit with some about myself. I got a good introduction, so I probably don't have to say too much. I started out writing poetry in middle school, but it wasn't very good. But you know, what they say is true, that the more you write, the better you get. And so I feel like I'm always improving. Anyway, sorry, I have my makeshift cue cards here. Okay, in 9th grade, I first entered the Eileen Jaffa Poetry Contest for young poets. And since then, I've entered every year. And as I've said to the judges, it was really my successes in that competition and the encouragement of the judges on the panel. They always gave me kind words after the readings. That's what encouraged me to keep writing and keep sharing my writing. And as I've said, to think of myself not as a person who writes poetry, but as a poet. So tonight I'm going to be reading some of my poems from over the years, some recent poems that I've written, very recent, one today. So anyway, so I guess I'll get started then. The first poem that I'm going to read is one of my personal favorites. It's called "The Night Was Made for Us." It's true the night was made for lovers, but look closer, I'm sure that you'll find many others. The sulkers and the sleep-starved mothers, the night was made for us. The wall starers and the alley walkers, the hot tea drinkers and the midnight talkers, the vandals of local high school lockers, the night was made for us. The dreamers and the late show fans, the overtime workers with shaky hands, the drivers of cross-country moving vans, the night was made for us. The heartbroken and the heartbreakers, the lost at mind and the loveless lovemakers, the addicts, the artists, the givers, the takers, the night was made for us. It's true the night was made for lovers. You may see them quiet, a hold of one another. But remember the night holds many others, the stars they cross not just for lovers. Thank you. Next, this poem is kind of, well, it's about being a teenager, which is something I know about. It's called Eskimo. I'd like to be infinite, cosmic, divine, or at least be able to make up my mind. In matters of spirit, in matters of matter, I'd like to think that what I think matters. But my thoughts become lost, like waves to the sea, though I drew the map and created the key. And I find my tongue is useless when I try to speak, as a saltwater fish finds a freshwater creek. This third poem is actually a poem that I wrote a few years ago, and it won the commemorative award in the Eileen Jaffa Young Poets Contest, and it's one of my favorites. It's hard to explain the background, but I guess that's one thing about poetry. Silence. In her silence, the slight lingering after she spoke, that's where I heard it. You'd never guess from her tone, the tone that implied that those stories were not of her, no. The pain was another's pain, the struggles of an unknown. Even I, with stories of my own, would not have known, had it not been for her silence. In that silence, I heard her sorrow. I knew that pain was hers alone. And although our stories have little in common, our silences will always sound the same, I know. I wrote this poem after I saw actually a dove fall from the sky and kind of tore me up for a while, so I know I had to write about it. Dove. I never knew one thing of life until it drew its wings to fly. That carefree dove up in the air, I watched as it took to the sky. I never knew one thing of death until it drew its final breath. That helpless dove beneath the tree, I watched it drift away from me. I like to write poetry based on things that I hear in my classes because I feel like there's always something to learn. And sometimes things that you learn about writing don't come from your English classes. And this one was inspired by actually my science class. And it's interesting to learn that the world is so imperfect, and I don't know, I like it that way. So this poem is called Disarray. The world is expanding, losing order every day. Its natural state is one of disarray. But the earth has never been so weak. It has no voice and cannot speak. It has lived 1,000 quiet lives, and though I'm young, I still can cry words of protest, just a sigh. That wind could turn the ocean's tide. And since the sea covers the earth, the tide directs it where to turn. So if I speak, the world will spin, as long as it's good-natured wind. But if I hold my breath and hide, who will turn the ocean's tide? Perhaps the world would go still, and since lack of change is perfection's will, there would be order and no disarray, but the sun would no longer light up the day. So speak I will, and turn the tide, to keep this disorderly world alive. And this poem is for a friend of mine who actually passed away a few years ago, but still think of her. 6 miles deep. They pumped her full of the ocean. Her heartbeat swelled with the waves. Her fingers swam across shadowy figures as she counted her last precious days. Her eyelids rose to show shallow tide pools, blinking saltwater tears on her porcelain skin. Ripped from the shore, she was forced to abandon and swim with her scales and fins. Weighed down by her dastardly fortune, their eyes followed her elegant frame as she drifted down further into the depths, and they sunk back to sulk in their shame. Buried among her fellow shipwrecks, her sighs became echoes of heartache. Lost without light, she lay still in the sand, drowning in her own heartbreak. They pumped her full of the ocean. Her heartbeat fell like the waves. They sunk her down 6 miles deep, straight down to her underwater grave. This is a very authentic poem because it's written on a napkin, because that's all I had. And this was another one inspired by something that I learned in class. I thought it was interesting that actually 1/3 of our DNA is shared with daffodils, which you wouldn't think. So this poem is called Daffodil. 33.333% of an infinity of tiny twists inside of me. Sunshine petals pushing out, await the end to fortune's drought. 2/3 man can't beat them down. My skin is soil, soul's the bud. Rivers run, veins of blood. Flowers blooming from this mud. It has to do also with the fact that it seems like everything is connected, and it's so interesting to find out that if we have 1/3 of our DNA shared with daffodils, how much do we have with other things and everything? So then let me look around here. This one is one that I wrote for my father. He passed away when I was in 6th grade. It's called Father's Blood. Father's blood still runs within me, though otherwise has dried. Scents and sounds, long since scattered, linger in my mind. Seldom do I think of when my small self could fit within his tall, broad form, long since past, though still these memories do last. I was talking to a friend of mine a few days ago about how I like to surround myself with very interesting people, and I told her that I'm sort of like a collector. And, well, I decided that since we had that conversation together, I would write a poem about her and talk about that a little bit. It's called Trailblazer. I don't collect stamps or postcards or baseball cards, or anything that can be held or torn. But I am a collector of extraordinary people. Not one is an abbreviation. Each is an unabridged, unadulterated feature film of a human being. Ask her once, twice, 7 times. Of herself she'll say ordinary. But a collector sees past that. Because when everyone is speaking, she's listening. And when I think of her, I can't help seeing her turn quick, eyes flash, and hair blow past, one cheek soaking up the sun, then turn back running up driftwood beaches and California coast. No diagnosis of genius or model. She's an unprescribed artist, I'll say. And to the list, I'll add trailblazer and subtract ordinary. And speaking of her, this is her favorite poem that I've written. She's my biggest fan, and she couldn't make it tonight, but she's a great person. Hard to think. It was so hard to think of. It was so hard to think. I tied the thoughts to red brick and tossed them in to sink. Into the darkness they drifted so swiftly. The moment of peace was mangled as quickly. Had I not noticed the string in my hand? My grip so tight, I fell to the sand. Gravity dragging me closer to edge, tumbling rough into self-induced mess. My mind broke the surface. The damage was done. I had tried to break free, but we were still one. Thought and I were together once more, pulled to the bottom, collapsed on the floor. But the decision was made, and that is what counts. I went askew while my thoughts traveled south. I'd accomplished the task, but then at what price? Cold until numb, directionless ice. Was it more difficult before I let go? I haven't the thoughts to tell me it's so. not sure how much time I've got. Do I have time for a few more? Okay. Then I'll read this one. It's called A Person Cannot Move Me. A person cannot move me. A landscape has no pulse, and a sunset cannot sigh. Yet still I feel my heart swell when I see the rising tide. Because a person cannot move me in the same way as the clouds, and no lover's words can woo me like nature's gentle sounds. Never am I more at peace than when I sit amongst the trees, as the company of peers is fine, but the earth's conversation is divine. And I'll read two more. This one is called Dancing on the Edge of the Earth. Didn't we dance on the edge of the earth? I remember we dipped our toes in the water. We saw where the ocean met the horizon, where the sun dropped down to where no one could find it. Days ago, I pressed my cheek to your chest and heard the sound of your heart, flitting fast in its own frantic dance. But today I can't find the boy from the sand. Maybe you've realized that the earth has no end. Perhaps you followed the sun as it dropped. But I don't mind thinking that it is the end, if I can still dance on the earth's western edge. And the last poem that I'm going to read is actually about one of the extraordinary people that I've collected. It's called The Pianist. At night you have an artist's hands, smoother, swifter than trickling sands. Play me a springtime, make the earth sing, give voice to all silent yet beautiful things. Let me hear colors, emotions, and time. Allow my dreams speak through elegant sighs. Your fingers weave melodies as light as the air, but towards my heart they've no passion to spare. Perhaps if I held the still grace of the seas, or the fragile persistence of blossoms on trees, perhaps then you'd hear music with each thought of me. Thank you so much to everyone who came here tonight to hear me read. It's really just an honor. I mean, I feel like it's incredible for me to be so young and to be allowed to come here and read in front of so many people who are interested in hearing someone reading poetry. And I'm very eager to hear meter maids come and read their poetry too. So thank you.